After a bit of a break, Nintendeen came back today with a couple of new videos. And this is actually the second one that he uploaded, but I found it a lot more interesting. It's him coping and seething about the insane new Steam Deck price hikes. As we know, the Steam Deck has jumped up several $100s. And Nintendeen is coping about it by trying to argue that this is somehow not an issue for the PC gaming community. This is what we call a cope.
You do not need a Steam Deck to play Steam games. I know this is something logical that most people should easily understand, but you would actually be surprised that there are a ton of people that I don't think fully grasp what Steam is.
So this is the cope that this mastermind comes up with, is this idea that actually, you don't need a Steam Deck to play Steam games, as if the entire purpose behind the Steam Deck wasn't the idea that it was an alternative to the Switch. If you're going to have something that you can carry around with you and play games, you're going to want a Steam Deck and not a standard gaming PC. So his entire argument just doesn't work at its core. But the second aspect of this, and the thing that I find the more disgusting aspect of this, is that he seems to think that people just automatically have gaming PCs just lying around their homes, that you can just download Steam on things you have lying around and play everything on there, when that's not really the case. You have to buy equipment. You have to spend thousands of dollars to get a gaming PC. You have to get a desk for it. You have to get a monitor. You have to get everything. If you're starting from scratch, it can be quite expensive. Obviously it evens out a little bit once you have the stuff, and then you can just kind of, gradually replace things as needed. But when you're first starting out, PC gaming is very, very, very expensive. But the thing that gets me about this is just how adamant he's been that the Nintendo Switch 2, how its price point was unacceptable, that it's too expensive, that Nintendo's scamming the consumers. And now that Valve has raised the price for the Steam Deck, he is doing damage control and just brushing everything under the rug, ignoring the obvious reality that PC gaming has become far more expensive than console gaming, and that Switch 2 is still somehow a worse deal than the significantly more expensive Steam Deck.
Some people seem to be of the opinion that in order to play a Steam game, you have to buy a Steam Deck, or you might have to pick up the upcoming Steam machine. But in actuality, you can have an entire library of Steam games without owning a single bit of Steam hardware.
I love how this is damage controlling the situation. This is him trying to explain why you shouldn't care about the Steam Deck, but instead it's him telling you why the Steam Deck is just a product that you don't need. This is him just doing his best to present this narrative that nobody needs Steam hardware, nobody needs to buy Steam hardware, and as a result, nobody should care about the price. But in the end, what he's doing is just kind of explaining, telling you the same thing I've been doing, in that you don't need a Steam Deck. The reality is it's a complete waste of money. It's a complete waste of hardware. It's not good hardware. It's too overpriced. And no amount of coping about how you can play Steam games elsewhere is really going to change that. The simple fact of the matter is the Steam Deck and the GameCube are completely irrelevant pieces of hardware that have no purpose. If you're a PC gamer, you're better off just playing on your gaming PC.
For example, while most of my PC gaming is done through Steam, the average person who does game on their PC, until I purchased my Steam controller, I didn't really buy anything that I used regularly from Valve. I do have a Steam Deck. I bought it on a discount last year, and then I gave it to my cousin. Well, he's technically borrowing it, though I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get it back. I know you're watching this. But the point is that outside of the Steam controller, the entire setup that I play on did not require me to buy any hardware from Steam.
I love how the cope is supposed to be how Steam is this super flexible system, and how you can do anything with it, and how it's consumer friendly, but all he's doing is establishing why it's more desirable to own a Switch 2 as opposed to owning a Steam Deck. Because If you own a Switch 2, you'll be able to play games that are only available on that platform. Steam is not like that. There is no reason to ever support Steam hardware because it's never going to have the quality software that is exclusive to Nintendo consoles. This is not a controversial thing to say or believe. It's just a simple fact.
Or from Valve, rather. I feel like this is a point that needs to be drilled down into people's minds, because the Steam Deck now has gone up in price. And that's obviously bad. It's ludicrously high. I am not trying to defend a price hike. But it's important to differentiate that just because two things go up in price, one does not equal the other. A console going up in price is worse, objectively. In fact, it's actually significantly worse. Because right now, here's what happens. If somebody decided they wanted to get into PC gaming, and then they were thinking about buying a Steam Deck OLED, and they just saw that it went up $200, so now it's out of budget. Well, they could still get into PC gaming. They can buy a number of different handhelds. They can even use their old laptop. And if they're looking for something that's not portable, they can even grab a cheaper desktop.
Bro! Everything's getting more expensive. I don't understand this giant cope. You can't use decade-old, used hardware to play new games because it isn't good enough, it isn't powerful enough, it's not like a top-of-the-line system, and you can't just like buy a cheaper brand when everything is going up in price. If you go for the cheap knockoff, like lower budget handheld gaming PCs, right, as they're called, these new handheld consoles, if you go for a cheaper version of that, you're going to get lower performance, you're going to get less support, you're going to get more faulty hardware, and it's just not going to be worth the money that a Switch 2 purchase would have had. This is straight up boomer logic of just buy something cheaper, bro. Just use your old gaming laptop you have lying around, bro, as if like this entire discussion isn't being had for people who haven't been into PC gaming at all over the past several years. If you're just getting into PC gaming, you aren't going to have a new PC lying around that can just play Doom or whatever, okay? It just doesn't work like that. You have to put the money down to get invested in the hobby.
They have alternatives, even in the high-end space. Let's say somebody was thinking about dropping over $1,000 last year on either the Legion Go 2 or the Xbox Ally X. Well, the Legion Go 2 recently had a price hike and it went up from around $1,300 to close to $2,000. The way that it works in the PC space is that, well, that thing's out of budget now. It's overpriced. It's not something that somebody wants to spend, perhaps. So now, instead of buying the Legion Go 2, they could buy that Xbox Ally X for $1,000. Assuming, of course, they were looking for the highest end handheld available. The idea here is that there are alternatives, and they cover all types of different budgets. There are many people out there right now who are just anxiously looking for an outrage from PC gamers for the price increase of the Steam Deck. And the logic behind it is that there was an outrage for the Switch 2 prices, there was an outrage for the PlayStation 5 prices, so now they want the PC gamers to complain. But the fact that you can still play every single PC game without having a Steam Deck makes all of the difference when it comes to these price increases.
Nintendeen's entire argument hinges on this idea that you already have a gaming PC to play your games on. It doesn't matter that the Switch 2 is better than the Steam Deck. It doesn't matter that most people aren't willing to pay for the overpriced gaming PCs. It doesn't matter that that like none of this makes any sense. Like, I can't believe he's seriously making this argument that you can just make it work, bro. The Switch 2 is still a bad deal, bro. It's such a disaster, bro. Like, give me a break.
Somebody that wants to play Donkey Kong Bonanza on the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to have to spend whatever price the Nintendo Switch 2 costs in order to play Donkey Kong Bonanza. Actually, that's a bad example because Bonanza proved to not really be that good of a system seller.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, for the record, Bonanza sold about 5 million units on a 20 million unit install base. It is a Switch 2 exclusive. So what Nintendeen isn't telling you is that is extraordinarily good for a game like this. That is extraordinarily good for a console at this point in its lifespan. Like, the problem is that like Nintendeen isn't accounting for the fact that this is a game that's going to be an evergreen title, that it's going to sell gradually over time, and it's probably going to crack like 20 million lifetime. This is going to be like one of the Switch 2's flagship games, okay? It's going to be like one of the go-to Switch games forever. Mario Odyssey had a pretty similar arc, actually, where like, it came out at the end of 2017, didn't like sold like a couple of million units initially, and then gradually sold more and more and more as people like bought Switch 2s and started like buying games for their Switch 2s. Like Bonanza isn't a system seller in the sense because Mario Kart World is the system seller. Like Bonanza is simply like the first major game that people pick up after the system seller. So yeah, selling 5 million on a 20 million install base is very, very, very good. And it's kind of laughable that Nintendeen would imply otherwise. Like I've seen people even argue that like Mario Kart World hasn't sold that well when like, 3 out of 4 Nintendo Switch 2 owners own it, which is just laughable that like it is laughable that people like Nintendeen are still pushing this line. It's just absurd.
But we'll go with it anyway. Let's assume that Bonanza sold as well as Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. The point is, the idea here is that what you are paying for a Switch plus Bonanza is the price to get into Donkey Kong Bonanza. So a $50 increase at the price of the Nintendo Switch 2 is effectively a $50 increase for Bonanza.
No, you fucking retard. You're paying $500 for Bonanza and all of the other games on Switch 2. You don't just buy a Switch 2, buy Bonanza, and then that's it. You're getting access to all the other games that are being made for that platform. Your argument doesn't work. Like, the idea that Bonanza is the only game available on Switch 2 is just straight up wrong. Because you have all the other first-party games. You have the ports. You have the third-party exclusives. You have, like, retro stuff. You have, like, all the things the console can do outside of gaming, right? You have, like, all of this that proves the Switch 2 is a hyper success story that makes it worth owning in and of itself. Like Bonanza is a reason to own a Switch 2, but it's not the only reason. The idea that you pay $570 for Bonanza is just laughably stupid and makes no sense.
And that's true even if you own a Switch 1. You cannot play Bonanza on your Nintendo Switch 1. It is a Switch 2 exclusive game. So the price increases for consoles that have exclusive titles are actually a detriment to the gaming community and cause a much larger uproar.
The real reason is that PC gamers are cocksuckers and will eat up anything that Valve spits out. That's basically what he's saying here.
Because they are barriers of entry in order to experience those titles. On the other hand, there are 0 Steam games that are locked behind the Steam Deck. So in a similar type of scenario, let's say there are 2 individuals, one person owns a Switch 1, the other person owns a low-end PC. The individual that owns a Switch 1, now he wants to play Bonanza, but he can no longer afford it because the Switch 2 had a price hike. The person that owns a low-end PC sees a price hike for the Steam Deck, well, he can still play every single one of those games that Steam Deck could have played on his PC.
Nintendo, do you not have a job? Can you not, like, work another week and then save up the $50 to pay for the price hike? Like, realistically, who is going to be put off by a $50 price hike for Switch 2? Like, if you're really going to buy the console to play Bonanza, like, it's not really that big of a deal, especially if you're planning on picking up other games down the line. Like, what exactly is the problem? Like, oh, it's a $50 price hike and I can no longer afford it. Like, just make more money. Like, do something. Like, figure it out. Like, I just can't imagine that's a situation anybody would ever be in. Like, if you're that broke, don't buy a video game console.
You are not bound by the hardware in the PC space, therefore the price of the hardware, yes, it's bad that it's going up in price, but it's not as terrible as when consoles do it. And I realize, for a lot of you, I'm just preaching to the choir here. I think most people here get it. But there will be some people that still are not quite adding up why it's such a big difference. And this is actually a very big reason why I spent a lot of last year trying to explain the difference to people, the difference between a handheld gaming console and a handheld gaming PC. One is not like the other. On my handheld gaming PC, I can run the entirety of the GameCube library, whereas on the Nintendo Switch 2, you only have access to 9 GameCube games. It's all part of Nintendo's discretion.
No, you retard. There are exactly 0 games available on Steam Deck. What you're talking about is emulation, which is illegal.
And, well, you gotta pay a monthly subscription to access those. But anyway, let's just kind of break this down. According to various different sources online, there are close to 140 to 150 million active users for Steam. So at least around 140 million plus people that are actively using the Steam platform. 140 million people are using Steam, and only 4 to 6 million Steam Decks have actually been sold since the device launched. These aren't even active Steam Decks, this is just the amount that have been sold. So if you're wondering why there might not actually be a major uproar for the Steam Deck having a price increase, or if you're wondering why when the Steam machine gets its price announced, it's actually not going to bother that many people, it's for this reason. A vast majority, an overwhelming majority, of people that actually use Steam and game on PC are not playing on Steam hardware.
I love how he's admitting that Steam hardware doesn't sell, and he's trying to spin it as a good thing. What an idiot.
Actually, something like 93% of the recent Steam hardware survey shows that people aren't even playing on Steam OS, they're playing on Windows. This is what it means when you are not locked behind a specific brand's hardware in order to enjoy the games on their platform. Now look, I'm not trying to make an argument here that the Nintendo eShop should be available on PC. That's a whole separate discussion. However, if you could get on your desktop and you can access the eShop and you can buy and download the games for the Switch 2 and play them on your PC, then a price hike for the Nintendo Switch 2, even if it was like $1,000 for that console, would not get nearly as big of a backlash. It would still be bad, sure, people would still call Nintendo greedy, just like many people right now are calling Valve greedy, but nobody would dwell on the conversation for nearly as long. Because, again, in order to access the eShop, you have to buy that Switch 2. In order to play Bonanza, you have to buy that Switch 2. It's a barrier, it's a blockade. And the reality is you're not getting that barrier when the Steam Deck goes up in price.
You have a barrier for portable Steam gaming. Okay? The simple fact of the matter is you can't carry around a laptop, you can't carry around your desktop, you can't carry around shit. The Steam Deck was supposed to be the counter to the Switch. It was supposed to be the handheld gaming PC. It was supposed to be the thing that destroyed the Switch and like was a way more portable console. And the simple fact of the matter is that it wasn't. It failed. It didn't outsell the Switch 1, and it will never outperform the Switch 2. And now you're coping and seething about the price hike and trying to say it doesn't matter when it totally, totally does.
In fact, according to the statistics, most people that are arguing that PC gaming is better, most people that run around spouting PC master race and consoles should die and exclusives should not exist, most of those people that are putting up that fight do not even own Steam hardware. So yeah, the point is you're not going to be seeing the same type of backlash against Steam. As a matter of fact, the only people that are going to have a backlash against the price increases for the Steam Deck, and even a backlash against the Steam machine when that is announced and whatever price that is, the only people that are going to try to make a big deal about it are console gamers.
I mean, in the sense where PC gamers have spent the past like 4 years or so assuring us that the Steam Deck was better than the Switch 2, it was better than Nintendo Switch, it was cheaper than Nintendo Switch, it had more games than Nintendo Switch, it could play all the Nintendo games. Like, the simple fact of the matter is, yeah, I'm going to be talking about this because you made an absolute fool of yourself. You completely misrepresented the situation. You really seriously thought this was going to be a big like game changer in the space, and when that turned out to not be the case, you coped and seethed about it. Yes, I'm going to clown on you. Yes, I'm going to make fun of you. And the reason for it is because of how aggressively you tried to shield this worthless piece of hardware that you're now admitting has no value whatsoever.
It's going to be the Nintendo fandom that is upset because they're not treating Valve the same way that they treated Nintendo. They called Nintendo greedy and now they're not calling Valve greedy. Or Sony fans that are going to start comparing the price of the PS5 Pro with the Steam Deck OLED. Those are the only groups of individuals that are actually going to be trying to create an uproar over the Steam hardware going up in price. But the thing is, you have 140 million monthly active users, and a significant majority of them, probably a negligible amount, is actually going to be affected by these price increases. So they're not going to hate on Valve, they're just going to keep playing their games on the hardware they already have. Whereas right now with the Switch 2, you have, something like 20 million people. Most of them are based out of Japan, where the console was cheaper. So in Western markets, you have 10 to 15 million people that got a Nintendo Switch 2, and there are still over 100 million people that had the Switch 1 that are thinking about upgrading. So yeah, naturally, they're going to be a lot more upset seeing that the Switch 2 is priced too high. Whereas in the PC space, you still have people rocking the same hardware that they've had for a decade.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about this argument that I don't think a lot of people would realize. People are still playing on Nintendo Switch 1. Like, the entire cope that, like, the Nintendo Switch 2, like, oh, it only has 20 million cop units sold. Only 20 million people are playing Switch 2s right now. Like, it really doesn't account for the fact that the Switch 1 is still active. It's still getting new releases. There are still people playing it regularly. Like, the entire cope that Steam is bigger and more popular than console gaming because of how it has 140 million users a month. It just completely falls apart. Like, the simple fact of the matter is people are playing older Nintendo hardware. They're playing Nintendo games. They're experiencing Nintendo in other ways that Steam can't really match. And by the way, Steam does boot up the instant you start your PC, by the way. So the idea that it has 140 million monthly users is misleading. What's actually happening is that you boot up your PC and Steam goes live, and that counts as a login, even if you don't touch the service. I tested that myself. I'm very well aware of how that works.
Price increases are bad. Corporations are greedy. RAM prices are absurd. Modern gaming is becoming too expensive. All of these things are bad, but it does not mean that some things are not worse than others. Anybody that is trying to equate a price increase for the Steam Deck to make it seem like it's as bad as the price increase for a Switch 2, or even just the launch price for the Switch 2 even, to be honest. Anybody that's trying to equate the two is either extremely ignorant or very disingenuous. One of these is not like the other. And while both are bad, the Switch 2's price hike is clearly significantly worse, even if it's not as much as the Steam Deck's.
What a giant cope! What a giant cope. He is really arguing that the Switch 2 has less value than the Steam Deck for what reason? Because the Steam Deck has more features, or that you don't need a Steam Deck or whatever. How exactly does that make any sense? Why exactly are you making the argument that well, you don't need a Steam Deck and that means the Steam Deck won? How does that make any sense at all? If anything, this is a clear demonstration of why Valve is never ever going to make it in the hardware space. Something I've been saying for a long time. Valve is never ever going to be competitive with Nintendo in this way. And yet people like Nintendeen love to say it doesn't matter because we have PC, bro. Everyone owns a PC, but I think you're going to see more and more going forward just how that doesn't really mean a whole lot. This is a really good example as to why.
Until the day comes where Nintendo allows me to play Donkey Kong Bonanza or Pokemon Pokapia or Star Fox without being required to buy a Nintendo Switch 2, then the launch price and every subsequent price increase of the Nintendo Switch 2 will always be seen as worse than a hardware price increase in the PC space. That's just a reality. I want to be able to access the games and play them. If the hardware is a barrier of entry in order to play those games, then the price increase of that hardware is objectively worse.
Is this retard really implying that you don't have to pay real money for a gaming PC? Is he implying that you can somehow bypass the fact that you need some kind of PC to run Steam? Is he really trying to pretend as if somehow it's more affordable to pay $3,000 for a gaming PC, and then that's somehow more affordable than a $500 Switch 2? That doesn't make any sense. And that doesn't make any sense at all if you do the math. But yet this is the common reoccurring thing with these people, is that they just keep insisting that it's true.
Even if it's not as substantial of a price increase. However, I will throw Nintendo fans a bone. I now do think that the Switch 2 is better in value than the Steam Deck OLED. When you're comparing them one-to-one, sure, the Switch 2 is a better value. But I still don't think it's worth buying a Switch 2. I think at that point, you just don't buy a Steam Deck OLED. You buy something else and get into PC gaming for a cheaper price. The ROG Ally was available for like $480 the other day. I think that's a better value than the Switch 2. It gives you access to the full Steam library, and it's a very comfortable handheld. If you turn on Slick Deals, you'll get a notification for any laptop, handheld, gaming PC, any device really that can be a much better value than both the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch 2. So yeah, if Nintendo fans want a little bit of a victory, I now think that the Switch 2 might actually offer a better value at those price points. But if somebody was trying to get into PC gaming, there are significantly more options than now the very expensive Steam Deck OLED. And I'm hoping this video will help people understand why there will not be that major of an outrage from the entirety of the gaming community for the increases of price for the Steam Decks. It's just not really relevant enough of a discussion to garner any kind of backlash in the same fashion that we saw for the overpriced Nintendo Switch 2. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.
What a giant cope. He's really gonna try and imply that, like, yeah, we're not affected by this at all. Like, oh, this doesn't bother us at all, which is why I made this video immediately once the news broke. What a fucking retard. I am just this is the angriest I've been at Nintendeen for a while. Like, what a fucking dipshit. Like, even when Nintendo takes a massive W against Valve, like, people like Nintendeen have to come crawling out of the woodwork and try to ruin it. And the worst thing is, I feel like a lot of people don't even realize this is a W, because I feel like people don't realize that there was a war being fought. You know, there were a lot of YouTubers like this trying to gaslight you into thinking the Steam Deck was somehow a better value than Switch 2. But now that's done with, that's over now, and we can move on. So going forward, I don't want to hear people talking about the Steam Deck again. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for supporting the channel, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.